I'm Mitch Kessler, president of Kessler Consulting, and this is Robin Mitchell, who you also met. She's the project manager on this job, working day-to-day with staff. And your staff has been, we've had the opportunity to work with Jeff and Terry and Peter and Brian and all the folks. And these folks are really committed to doing this, and they're really committed to what they do on a day-to-day basis. And I think sometimes we forget what it's like to be out on the street picking up, garbage and recyclables on a daily basis. And these guys really, with the infrastructure you have, do a great job in doing that. So it's been a pleasure to work with them and a pleasure to meet you. It's, our office is in Florida, so we don't know Fayetteville that well yet. This is our third trip here. And I will say, having met you all, it's a very interesting community and a very diverse group of folks who you have very interesting backgrounds. We work with a lot of governments, and it's not quite the mix that you have all the time. It's kind of fascinating, and it's been stimulating. I think we're going to have a lot of fun working with you and putting something in place that works for you. So we're really here to talk about, and we don't have handouts of this to save paper, but the project purpose. You came up with a purpose to hire a consultant, and we're here to help with that, and we appreciate being selected for it. The purpose today is really to update you on the project status and some of the pilot programs that we've talked with staff and Don about, and the next steps we're going to take. And the theme that we're going to talk about kind of throughout this is we see this concept of status quo, which is the 20%, whatever you want to call it, your recycling rate, your recovery rate, and where we understand you want to get, which is this change moving towards 80%. So let's get out of the way up front that is a very lofty and ambitious goal. There is currently no community in the United States that's truly hit 80%. It's certainly a target to shoot at, and it's not going to happen overnight, and it's going to take a change in your infrastructure. So we'll talk about that. We're looking for your direction on anything tonight. Again, as Peter mentioned, we're about a third halfway through the project, so your input is most appreciated and welcome. Very briefly, this is the scope that we had. The first 3 tasks there are completed. We're now working on some of the options and diversion analyses and doing some of the economic analysis and working on putting these pilots in place, and that will all lead to a master plan. So that's our scope. This slide is really to illustrate what we think is critically important. It's very simple. It's a seesaw with the 3 main elements of a solid waste program on it, which is you collect yard waste, you collect solid waste, you collect recyclables. That material is processed somewhere to be turned into something, or we haven't accomplished anything, and then it goes to a market. And that market could be a disposal market, such as the landfill, or it could be the recovery market, such as aluminum going back to aluminum cans and paper being made back into fiber, or organic materials such as yard waste being made back into compost. So those are the elements of a sustainable solid waste program. We just wanted to mention what I think is obvious, but sometimes is forgotten, is all services have a cost. It costs money to pick up garbage, it costs money to pick up recyclables, it costs money to pick up yard waste, it costs to manage household hazardous waste, tires, everything has a cost. These are services. Services all have fees. And we think you have pretty reasonable fees. What we're really talking about here is adjusting the infrastructure to move you from 20% forward if that's what you choose to do when we come back with our final recommendation. They all have a cost. You can't touch one piece of this seesaw, and that's why we have the little balancing thing without impacting the other. So if you're going to keep collecting the way you're going to collect, or you're going to change how you're going to collect any of the materials, it impacts the processing and impacts the markets. So that's the balance we're really striving to get at.
So the first thing we did was a baseline analysis of your existing program. And to recap a little bit, you already know you have a pay-as-you-throw program, which in the industry is a pretty progressive program. It encourages waste reduction and recycling, and it's great. You also have separate yard waste collection and your own composting system, which is functioning very well. Recycling, you have what we call a curb sort system. We'll talk a little bit more about terminology in a minute. It's very labor intensive. It's not really state of the art. I actually can't even tell you another community in the country that has this kind of program. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. On the multifamily and commercial side, you do have recycling programs in place. We've heard some of the property managers call the roll-off on the left the battleship. That's your program for multifamily, and it's the best that you've been able to do because you do have a curb sort program. And it's really requiring even the residents in a multifamily complex to sort by material type, which requires you to have this very large roll-off, which takes up, I don't know, eight parking spaces or so. So that's been a challenge. You know, not many complexes are willing to give up those parking spaces. And in addition, you know, not many people are willing to carry all their recyclables down and spend the time, walk across the complex and sort like this. We're going to talk a little bit later about a single stream program. If you had a program like that, you could use smaller containers dispersed throughout a multifamily complex. So it would enable you to do a lot more in terms of multifamily. The same with commercial curb sort, and it's literally curb sort here by material types. We also think there might be room for improvement with a different type of collection and processing system on your commercial recycling program. As Jeff mentioned, we do an actual operational assessment of your collection operations and the transfer station. Overall, you have a really well-run operation, high employee morale. We were impressed with especially the level of knowledge of your workers. They're not just there collecting the materials, they take the time to read up on what's happening in the industry, so we were very impressed. We definitely, we provided a technical memorandum with a variety of recommendations where we think there are opportunities for efficiency improvements, and your folks are reviewing those now to see what they can implement. Let's talk about waste generation. That's the total amount of waste that your system handles. And we looked at it over the last 10 years. And it's pretty much flatlined. Over the last 10 years, it's fluctuated between 16 and 20%, what we call diversion from landfill. That's a combination of what you recycle and what you compost. So it's good for the system you have, but it is sort of flatlined in that time period. We also did some projections because the goal that we were directed was to shoot for 80% by the year 2025. We looked at population projections and increase in garbage and waste generation over that time period. And for you to get there, as Mitch said, you know, this is status quo versus change. It's really a complete flip-flop of your system. And instead of diverting 20%, you would only be disposing of 20%. So that's a significant amount of change. And what will be required to get there to maximize diversion? It's going to require residential, commercial, all materials, looking at all your programs, creating the infrastructure, facilities, technologies, and the policies that help drive that change. So we'll be looking at all of those.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Education is extremely important, so I don't want to downplay that. But you've been doing a lot of education, so that in and of itself isn't enough.
By all materials, what we're getting out there, it's not just some potentially recycled materials that Robin's about to talk about, it's all. So you need food waste, you need all the plastics, you need all the paper, and you'll see why right here. So that's what all materials is getting at.
So we spent a week here actually sorting through your garbage, residential, commercial, and this is a pie chart of everything that's generated. So the top two pieces of the pie, what's recycled and what's composted, and that makes up the 20%. The waste composition study itself is much more detailed than this, so we've simplified it a little bit and broken it down by residential and then commercial/multifamily materials, and what's recyclable, what's compostable. So let's start on the left side of the pie. In the green slices of pie, we have residential compostables and multifamily and commercial compostables. That's made up of a little bit of yard waste. You're actually doing a good job diverting yard waste. It's primarily food waste and what we call low-grade paper that can't really be recycled, but it could potentially be composted. You combine all that, that's about 19% of the waste that's generated. We feel that's an opportunity And that's why we're proposing this commercial food waste pilot program.
Quick question, does commercial include multifamily or is that in residential?
It's multifamilies in with commercial for the most part.
Thank you.
Most of it's collected using dumpsters, good question. On the right side of the pie chart, in the blue pieces of pie, that's the recyclable materials that are currently included in your program. Certain types of paper and containers. There are some materials that you're not including in your program right now, like plastics 3 through 7, aseptic containers. Those are the orange pieces of pie. But you look at all those potentially recyclable materials, that's another 26% of the waste stream that's generated. And again, the striped pieces of pie are the multifamily commercial. And you can see that's really on the recycling end, that's where the greatest opportunity lies. And again, to get at those, we think that a different collection system is going to be needed. And that's why we're proposing to do a single stream pilot. We were initially proposing just residential, but after meeting with some of you, we are looking at trying to incorporate multifamily and possibly commercial into that pilot as well.
My turn. So we thought it was important, and having met with almost all of you, that we really discuss the definitions, because it seems to us that people are using some of the terminology a little differently. So we wanted to at least go through so we could have a common understanding of when we're using words and you're using words. So the issue is really who sorts the recyclables. This is focused on the recyclables where? Is it the curb or is it a recycling center, which is a materials recovery facility known as a MRF? So this is your program, and we would define this as curb sorting. It means the resident puts it out, sometimes with one bin, sometimes with multiple bins, sometimes the fiber's in one and containers are in the other. Sometimes it's all mixed together. It's each individual. Brian and his folks do a great job of trying to educate, but the driver gets out of the truck and sorts that material into those bins. Now, that was a very common practice in the 80s, in the Northeast, in the West Coast, where curbside recycling really started to grow from. In Canada, where it actually originated before coming in, the first curbside programs were in Canada. It is very unusual today to do this. The main reason for that is that person standing out there in the yellow shirt. To have somebody in this day and age outside in the inclement weather, in a non-temperature controlled environment, getting out of a truck, the saying in the industry is stay in the cab. Every time that person gets out of the truck, the potential for an accident or something happening magnifies greatly. Not only is that an issue, and automated systems prevent that, but that person has a real burden on their hand going through that by hand sorting. It makes sense. It gives you a real clean material. We'll talk about that. We talked about that with some of you. But there are systems now that replace that. These guys, the guys behind us, Brian and Jeff and his crew, these guys bust their butt and do a fantastic job. So let's be very clear about that. All we're saying, and want you to be aware, is they did do somewhere between 400 and 500 households a route. In an automated vehicle, it's double that. So you're just shifting, and that's the whole purpose of this. That was that little seesaw, and that's what we're talking about here. We're shifting who does what where is what's happened in the industry. So that's curb sort. Dual stream is a system where there's a requirement usually that there's two bins, but you only put fiber, paper, newspaper, office paper, whatever's collected in one bin, and the containers go in another. That's then put in a truck similar to what you have, but there's only two sections to it. One for the fiber, one for the containers, and then it goes to a facility such as this, which is indicating a more simple MRF, where the material is sorted by workers on a line. The fiber is sorted by the newspapers going in one direction, usually high grades in another. Sometimes it's all just mixed together. The containers are always sorted, the aluminum from the metals, from the glass, etc. So that would be a dual stream program. Then the next evolution in our industry is single stream. I think this is where there's some issues to discuss on single stream. Single stream really started about 15 years ago, and some of the early facilities, like anything else, were not great. The equipment was still evolving. If you would ask people about single stream facilities now, they'd say we're about on the 5th, depending on the company who makes the equipment, to the 7th generation of equipment. The first and the second generations had their issue. They had their issue with how much breakage was happening of the material, how efficient and effective they were. It's advanced to the point, and at a later time we could show you videos of some of these systems. There's air classification, there's optical sorting, there are all types of screening devices that really have automated this to allow a shift to happen fairly efficiently, where instead of it happening at the curb, it's happening at a facility like this. But the definition of single stream is all the recyclables are put in one cart, be it a 65-gallon cart, which is your middle-sized cart for your garbage, where you have 3 sizes to choose from. Usually it's a 65-gallon cart for a resident and a larger 95-gallon cart for a business. So that's what single stream is. What it historically has done is it allows more material to be put in a cart, because the carts, 65-gallon, hold significantly more than the bins that you use. And we're going to talk about contamination, an issue. There is more contamination in a single stream facility. There's also more tons that come in, and we'll talk about that in a second. Which gets us to our third way of processing for communities that don't want their residents to do anything, for whatever the reason is, and I can give you some of the reason. There's mixed waste processing facilities. In the past, they were called dirty MRFs. They were called dirty MRFs historically because many haulers, private sector haulers, would take their commercial loads, bring it back to a transfer station, throw some stuff on the ground or on a simple conveyor belt, and they would pull off cardboard and other easily to recover materials before they went to dispose of them, because it saved them money. So they charged somebody to collect it, they brought it back, they scavenged out the easily recoverable material, usually 10, 20% at the most of what came in, and then they disposed of it. That has also evolved to the point, the facility you probably have heard the most about, one of the newest facilities is in Montgomery, Alabama. The reason they went in this direction, their recycling rate was 3%. Politics, something you're well aware of, got to the point where the mayor was taking a lot of hits about when they're not recycling. They went out for an RFP, and somebody proposed all the capital, all the building, everything, $35 million, and they charged them a tip fee to process the recyclables, where they're currently diverting about 50% of what comes in. So overnight, their system went from 3% to 50%. Is it for everybody? A big 100% no. Are we recommending it in Fayetteville? Absolutely not. We really put this up so we're clear when we're talking about that single stream isn't mixed waste, nor dual stream, nor curb sort. So we just wanted to lay that out and show you what some of the different facilities look like. Goes on that one. Contamination has come up. We actually had some great discussions with a number of you yesterday about contamination. There is more contamination in a single stream plant. There's no doubt about that. I put this one up. We did this last night, actually, after meeting with you, to actually have some good data. We could provide data from a number of plants, but this is where the county I live in is Hillsborough County, the Tampa Bay area of Florida. And our client, they're our client besides living there, they went from a dual stream program that we just talked about, 2 bins, to a single stream program. And they did this about a year ago. Actually, it's now a year and a half ago. In doing that, when they had the program, this same materials, they were collecting about 30,000 tons a year of recyclables. And the residue/reject rate, which we should also talk about to define that so we're on the same page. The words contamination, rejects, and residue are often interchanged. I would define them for the purposes here. Is contamination is when the resident or business puts something in that shouldn't be in. The garden hose, the toaster, the hibachi. Well-meaning, the tricycle, the plastic tricycle, well-meaning, but it's not really part of the program. So that would be contamination. This number here, the reject and residue numbers, when that goes through processing, things are broken up, bottle caps go flying, labels go all over the place. There's just, the processing itself makes the material non-markable. A dual stream MRF that in Hillsborough County that was in place had about a 10% reject and residue rate. So the true tons recycled, and we know how important it is for you based on your interest in making sure that if something's tons recycled, it's really recycled and is back into a product, not just it goes into some magic hole somewhere. So we understand and appreciate your interest in that. So in Hillsborough County, 27,000 tons were recycled that way. They converted to single stream. They approximately doubled the tonnage. It's actually a little more than 60,000 tons. In the facility that it's going to, they have about a 20% contamination. That's at the high end. The issue there is there are so many different systems out there. You could have a single stream system that does 10% contamination, 15%, 20%. If it's higher than 20%, it was a really bad investment of money, because what are you doing getting all these tons to then dispose of 25, 30% of them? Those would be the older systems that we don't think make sense. bottom line here is there was a 78% increase in recycled in this community by going to single stream. You going to get the same numbers everywhere? Nope. Are you going to get about that kind of residue level? Yes. So the point in this case, and we could talk more about contamination and rejects and residue, it goes up, but you end up netting in program after program more total tons going back into the marketplace and recycle.
The only thing I would add as we move forward with this, we'll do an analysis that's more specific to Fayetteville.
This was a last night 10 o'clock edition. Stakeholder meetings. We just wanted to mention to you, I applaud you for wanting to get your community involved in this process, because that's how it's going to work. We had a public meeting. Some of you were there back in April. There were over 40 people who were at that meeting. We met with some of the multifamily stakeholders, the university. I'm not going to read the whole list, but we really are into getting input from all the involved parties, as well as yourself tonight. So that, and we met with processors, vendors, and tonight, obviously, meeting with you. So staying in that input section, staff was very clear with us that it was part of the scope, actually, that let's reach out to the residents. We did a stakeholder survey and got input. It was conducted online. We developed the questions. Staff reviewed and commented on them extensively. We then developed the final document that was put out there. You can see the number of responses. There are many, many more questions. There's in much more detail that is there, I think, Brian or Peter, that's online now, right? The survey?
The results are not yet.
They're not yet posted. They'll shortly be posted, the full results, right? We'll put them on when they're complete. So this was just to give you a feel that the percent of people, and it was broken down by residential and commercial, who support or strongly supported these activities. They're pretty big numbers, so we just wanted to say congratulations on the first one, because it was your decision to go out and develop a plan. So you can see the support you had for that. Adding more recyclables is the next one, and you can see the support both residential and commercial on that. And single stream, again, strong support in food waste, particularly on the commercial side, the restaurants and businesses wanting to do that. And we could all poke holes at surveys and understand the ups and downs of them, but you still had about 500 people respond, and the numbers are quite strong. So we have really good input back from folks. Well, probably almost enough talking on our part, because we do want input from you and any guidance you might have or questions. What are the challenges? Well, the diversion is flatline. That's really why you went to do this. I think the majority of you aren't satisfied with staying at the 20%. Next challenge is status quo is comfortable. It really is. I mean, it's just kind of easy to do what you always do. That's why I think people like their Lee or Levi jeans. It's like you've been wearing them for a long time. They fit. You know how to do it, and life's good. It's comfortable. We understand that, and it's back to that, do you want to change? And is the 80% another is obtainable? No, nobody in the United States has obtained it. Could I look at you? No, they have. That's not true. There are many communities that have obtained it, but it's because there's state policy that is artificially counting numbers to get there. We happen to live in the state that's the champion of that. So in our state, if you have a waste-to-energy plant or an incinerator, for every ton of garbage that you put through that and is converted to energy, it counts towards 1% of recycling. So it's just a different model. So I don't want to say nobody's obtained their state goal. In Florida, they have. Other states, they have. But through actual diversion and recycling, nobody has hit 80% legitimately yet. We think it's doable in the future. There will be communities doing it. There's a ways to go 20 to 80. You can't do it on education alone. Robin mentioned that education is critical to what you do currently, as well as to anything you would do in the future. You have to educate. But that in and of itself, without the infrastructure to handle the product, isn't going to get us there. The last one up here we think is most important. We have some meetings tomorrow with many partners, potential partners, is regionalization. And why we think regionalization is so important, in Northwest Arkansas, you don't really need 5 composting facilities. That's not going to work. You don't need 5 recycling facilities. I'm hoping that you could have a region in the communities and businesses working together with the private sector, which we think is an important play to this in a partnership situation. And again, we'll have a meeting tomorrow morning at 8:30 that we're bringing, as we've mentioned to a lot of you, a number of communities and regional associations. So we think that's exciting. And the bottom line is the focus is on, the end goal is on maximizing landfill diversion and doing it in a cost-effective manner. That's what the challenge you've put on us. So those are the challenges. What's next? is we're going to do the single stream pilot and the food waste pilot. And let me just take a minute to tell you about those. What happened, we started doing the work. This was not part of the original plan, but getting with staff, Peter, Terry, Brian, Jeff, we said, well, these two issues seem to be circulating around here a lot. You know, what else could we do to divert material? Well, we could spend 3-4 months doing a report, hand you a report that says at the end of it, once we got to know the community, yeah, you could do something on food waste, and you might want to look at single stream. Well, what would that get us? So what we proposed and had approved is let's actually do a pilot where we go to the university in their cafeteria in a building, and when we go to pick your number 20 restaurants in a grocery store, and we set up a pilot and we do it on your existing compost site to demonstrate that we can take in food waste, blend it with the yard waste, do it in an environmentally sound way with no odor, and have businesses that are very anxious to participate. Well, no, does it work or not? Now we could actually have a conversation 6 months down the road and say, that didn't work, nobody was happy, there was odor, the stores didn't want to do it, it made a mess. Now, I don't think that's going to be the case, but we'll have facts and not just opinions. The same on the single stream pilot. There's a lot of discussion in this community about the pros and cons of single stream. Let's let the data and the public and the businesses do the talking and see what we get. So with staff support, we're going forward with those two pilots, and we'll bring you back results. What's next is reduction and diversion options analysis. We talked about doing it in an economic way. I don't think you're going to approve something that isn't the wise use of funds and money. So we're going to look at different options you have and how you could get there. We're big believers in partners, both public sector and private sector partners. I don't think you should be in the business of running a recycling facility. Why? Because you only market so many tons. When you combine that tons with the many tons of another company that does this all over the country, you tend to get better rates and a better situation. And I will say, you guys are getting great money for your material because of the cleanliness of it and the quality of it. But we think there's partners who would work with you on the composting and the recycling side. There need to be policy, whatever decisions we make, there has to be policy to support and back that up. And then there'll be a master plan that hopefully will guide the direction you go for the next 10+ years. And with that, we just wanted to see, let's not get hit by a train here, but see if you had any questions or thoughts that we'd welcome your input.
What questions we got?
I was very interested in the curbside recycling. You're saying a lot of people aren't doing that. They're going to an automated system where the driver stays in the vehicle. What does that vehicle cost?
The vehicle costs somewhere between $250,000 and $300,000, depending on the type of vehicle.
And it's completely automated. The driver stays in the vehicle.
It's operated with a joystick, where it's the same way you currently collect your garbage.
A residential collection, right?
Yeah. That's how you do that material. And that's, I think if you would ask Jeff and Brian, what do the drivers prefer, running the garbage routes or the recycling routes, I don't think it's a too controversial of a topic, is it? So that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about automating that. If it works in this community. Might not.
And who would run those routes?
Your drivers. Yeah, I mean, you guys have staff that, as Robin mentioned, is like all over this. These guys are bought into the system, they're bought into working here, so yeah, it would be run by your staff.
So in a single stream program, Fayetteville would run its own routes?
Absolutely. Yeah, we wouldn't recommend changing collection. The private sector, I'm sure, comes to visit them, and you guys talking about how, we could do it, but you've made a decision. We have a split with our customers. Some franchise out and contract for those services. Some do it themselves. I'm saying absolutely, which one of the things we'll look at is the efficiency of those routes. And as Robin mentioned, the operational assessment, we've already made recommendations, and we'll have more
If
recommendations
we
to
looked at your
staff.
operations and it looked like it was broken, we might be here talking to you about, well, maybe you should privatize, but it's not broken. You have a good system running there.
Modernization and some efficiency needed.
What else? Right?
I do have a question. You were talking about multifamily recycling, and can we go to that slide where we showed the container,
The whale.
multifamily container taking up the 8th space?
Battleship. Is that, Alan, is that the big,
Yeah, the huge.
Yep.
Past it.
yes.
So it looks like it takes up
2 1/4.
2,
You
3,
have
a
to-
little over
Well,
3.
truck has
You need 40 feet in
Yeah.
front of it to
So-
pick up the.
So it goes how far?
They'll explain this.
Yeah. Well, they base that space, the number of spaces on the requirement to pick and lift that container. So you've gotta have to be able to access it with a truck and then pull it up onto the roll-off truck to be able to
So you're,
move it from the.
the
Where's it
container
at?
itself only takes 1, 2, 3.
That's what I'm wondering
4
about.
spaces,
Yeah.
but you gotta have another 4 spaces to actually.
Now, there are some
load it.
To
instances
get into
where
it?
strategically you can angle a container. There are some exceptions to that where you can angle one strategically so that you don't encumber as many spaces as that. But again, there's a reason they call it battleship. They're quite large. We've seen those.
It's a great question you're asking because there's 2 ways to replace that.
Mhm.
One is you would cut that down so the space it would take would be 1 parking space with an 8-yard roll-off that you've all seen behind stores.
Yeah.
And that would go in there, and then you'd need much less room to be able to pick that up with a front-end loader, so that would cut down tremendously. The other is the 2 bins, the carts that you see at the bottom right, where in some situations, depending on the size of the complex, you could have a series of 95-gallon carts that they pick up in the same automated fashion we talked about.
I mean, the ideal system is to pair your waste receptacles with your recycling receptacles. So that when your resident takes their materials down there, they're right there. They don't have to go searching for the recycling bin. They're both right there.
Yeah.
So that's ideal. Can every complex do it? I'm sure that there'll be hurdles to go over at some complexes where they feel there's not enough space.
You were also all very consistent about the importance of multifamily in this community and the growth of multifamily. And the meeting we had with that the mayor was at with the 45 folks were there. I mean, a hunk of those folks were from the multifamily saying, we want to do this, we want to do it now. So we understand the importance of that to the community.
And because of the university, you have a high percentage of multifamily, higher than in the average community.
And I also want to point out that due to the length of that container, we were not able to add glass into that. There was just no extra space. I get asked a lot about why we don't take glass in our apartment program. It's simply because we ran out of space in the container.
Yes, sir.
I have another question that you touched on something important, Brian. So if we were to do a multifamily, single stream only, just throwing that out there as a concept, program, would we be including glass in that, or would we be using our current system for glass? I mean, we have someone that takes that already, so.
That's a
Because
great.
most haulers charge to pick up glass now, they don't actually want glass because it's hard on equipment, machinery, fuel, all those things, so.
There's certainly a cost for, the particular cost, you're right, is on the processing of it, because you're mixing glass in now, in with the other materials, and you have to come up with a system to keep it out. We met with one potential processor this morning and had that exact discussion, and your timing of the question is great, because what we discussed with them as well, we could do glass separately, whatever it is on the side, we could do it in, and they were going to do some analysis and come back to us with a suggestion of the impacts of doing it each way that we'd be happy to share with you when we get it. So the decision hasn't been made on how to do that, is the real answer to your question at this point in the pilot.
Anything else? Yes, Matthew.
I just want to underscore how much I appreciate you coming to us at this point in the process. And I get the sense that most of the council feels that way too. I think that, well, I'm fond of pointing out that every mayoral candidate since 1996 has promised increasing recycling and expanding it to multifamily. And most of the council candidates who have had opposition have also promised the same thing. So, I mean, clearly we've waited long enough, 19 years, to even have this discussion. And, we've been in the community, it's always been a vibrant discussion about how to do that. And I think we've lost sight in the past a little bit about of the approach that we need to have, which in my opinion is to get a clear assessment of the facts and look at all the examples out there, and most importantly, to run a pilot and do it ourselves. So I think this is exactly the right approach. And if anybody's nervous, if you've been categorically against single stream in the past, if you're nervous about this pilot, I just promise you, in terms of my vote, if it turns out the pilot doesn't work, I'll vote against it. If it turns out it does work, then at least we've got the information to stand on, stable ground to rely on. So I just want to say that I really appreciate the approach, and I'm glad we're going to do the pilots.
Yes, sir.
again, I'm really thankful that we're doing this, and that we can use this information to make fact-based decisions on how we're going to reduce waste. Some of the things that I thought about since our earlier meeting is we've got a real problem with these bins being obstacles in our sidewalks, especially in our downtown area. They put their bins out, and then people who have reduced mobility are unable to navigate around them. So I think as we move forward, that's something that we should look at, is how can this not conflict with our active transportation goals.
Like the photo on the right, would that be an illustration?
Yeah.
Might be it.
Yeah, that sort of thing. And, we really want to make our whole community accessible, and these bins have been an obstacle. And additionally, the recycling bins are pretty difficult to carry. I know I always have to wait till I have junky clothes on to haul mine out. And for an elderly person, I could see how that would be really challenging. So, making the containers more friendly to people with different levels of mobility. And also, I love our pay-as-you-throw program, but even our smallest container is still way too big for me. I only have to take it out every 3 weeks or something. So it'd be great if we had more options as demographics change. Over 50% of American adults are single now. You're seeing more and more child-free households, and so reducing the size of the trash containers, or maybe the frequency. You could subscribe and they pick it up every other week instead of every week. And then also looking at some distributed models with composting for the more family-oriented neighborhoods. If we could have composting in conjunction with the community gardens program, so instead of having to transfer it all, to some regional facility, looking at and maybe that's something that we could go ahead and implement now. Is if we had centralized food waste composting or yard waste at community garden locations, that helps build community. It helps with composting, and it helps with food production. So I think we're addressing a lot of things with that. And then also compost delivery. Because we have this great compost facility, and a lot of people with gardens or yards that want to be able to access it. I mean, I know I don't have a truck, to rent a truck or borrow a truck to go access that compost. And I think we could sell a lot more of it and serve our citizens better if we could just get it to the customers.
I'm glad you brought that up. Staff committed to us that anytime anybody wants compost, they'll put it in their trunk and bring it directly to the house 7 days a week, 24/7. Isn't that what I heard? No? I guess not.
I've
But
seen
that
people put plastic down the back of a brand-new hatchback sedan and start shoveling compost in there, so
Sir,
it's very popular.
I think you raised some great points, and
Yes.
we may not have been clear enough on the compost pilot. What we're starting to focus on is the commercial compost. The reason for that is because they're large generators in a central place. I think what you're referring to, which would be the next step, would be on the residential side. And there are many examples of where there's actually local gardens that are taking that material and composting there and not even having to transport it. And there's probably some people in the community now that are doing backyard composting. I think, who did we meet with who told us about? Here's your composter right here, and who has much experience with composting. So we'd start with commercial and then move to residential, because it's much easier to get that larger generator and that material first.
Alan, you had another question?
Yeah, I did. Well, not a question really, but I think that food waste is one things we haven't even started to touch as a community. So I think if we really want to get anywhere, and I went back to the meeting and I read 80%. That was set as a lofty goal, and that's great. But as we talked about in our meeting yesterday, we need to be pretty specific, because we've hired you to do this, and that costs money. So we need to really give direction on what we want. So I think we can all agree that food waste is something that is low-hanging fruit, and we need to pick it up if we want to get anywhere. But also, I think that one of our major things as a city has got to be education. We've participated in a contract job with the Boston Mountain Solid Waste Program, and that's great. They do lots of little events. But events are not really continuing education. We talked about that last night, too. We need to really set up and implement, execute a great continuing education program in the city of Fayetteville that teaches people about recycling and makes them want to do it from early ages all through life, if we really want to be successful in maintaining a clean waste stream. And the last thing I'll say is I really think that we need a resolution in the city of Fayetteville that talks about the percentage of our recycled materials that go into the stream, whatever stream it is we choose. We stay with our curb sort and make it better if we go dual stream, single stream, whatever it is. That requires a certain percentage to actually be recycled like they do in British Columbia and like they do in Canada. Those are great laws and they actually see results. So if, those are just some things that I want to see us consider as a council too as we move forward through the process.
And I think that the last one in particular, a number of people have raised that concern that, you don't want to, I'm just going to say it, fakely be recycling. You want to really be recycling. And I think we mentioned to you, we would recommend in a contract when you're ready to do that, that there'd be a requirement on the processor to a maximum amount of residue depending on that their facility is allowed to produce. And anything over that, there's fines and the ability to cancel the contract.
Yeah.
Because you want it to be recovered or there's no sense in collecting this material.
And I want to make sure too that, anything that we ever do engage in, that we don't just see transparency from, I know Fayetteville, we have clear transparency with our materials recovery facility because we own it. But anything we ever got involved in, I'd want transparency and third-party audits, but I'd also want that information from the secondary processors that are processing that recycling to know what the actual contamination and residuals are, because right now, I just forwarded an article to Sandra from one of the nation's leading 501c3s on recycling, the Container Recycling Institute, and it talks a lot about single-stream recycling and the contamination rates, and that's information we need to know, and secondary processors don't often share that information with communities, and I wouldn't be interested at all in getting involved in a program where there wasn't transparency. So, just my 2 cents.
Mayor?
You didn't,
Sarah, then John.
Sir?
You didn't touch much on the construction and demolition waste. What were you?
We did it all, and it's down there on
Yeah.
the pie chart in the bottom. We think it's an important area. We haven't initiated much of the work yet on that. A couple things on construction and demolition. It fits into the same with compost. There's some materials that you can move around. Aluminum, paper moves all over the world. It's just a traded commodity. You don't want to take concrete and wood and start transporting hundreds of miles. So it's always better to deal with that material in your own backyard. I think we shared with you, we've had some success with all kinds of take-back programs where there's so much wood that's just being, we talked with Jeff about this, that's just being thrown away, that's very usable wood. And reuse programs, the facilities right now in the street from the Habitat for Humanity. So there's a lot of opportunity there, and we think that's an important material to target. It's not something that we put in one of the initial pilots, but construction and demolition, you won't get to 50%, never mind 80% without addressing construction and demolition materials. So
And
we're
that-
fully aware of that.
That's the other reason I like this pie chart, because you just add up the percentages of what could even potentially be recycled or composted, and you would have to get to 100% of all of it to get to 80% landfill diversion. So we're going to include all of it in our plan.
Well, and maybe just, I don't know if we probably maybe didn't hit on this enough, the numbers, just get these out of the way. What does zero waste mean? What does 80% mean? And really tell us what it means is do everything you can in your community that's economically viable to divert material from disposal. It costs to dispose of material, it costs to recycle. Let's hope that the cost of recycling is less than the cost of disposal, and then we're ahead. But you're not getting to 100%. And if you read the definition of the zero waste groups, it's talking about a much more integrated approach on the environment. It's not just about garbage, it's about air, water, traffic, everything that goes with it.
Designed for recycling.
Right, the producer responsibility, which you can only control so much of that in a local city. But we won't miss C and D.
John.
I expressed some of this sentiment when we had our private meeting in my office, but I just want to go on record to say I'm all in favor of being good stewards of what we've been entrusted with here in the city of Fayetteville, and recycling, I think, is part of that. But I want us to do so in the context of freedom. I don't want any program that's going to coerce a citizen into doing something he wouldn't otherwise do, or she wouldn't otherwise do. So when you say education alone won't be enough, it'll require investment in infrastructure, you didn't say only investment in infrastructure. It concerns me that we may come up with policies that place some of our citizens in a difficult position, and I don't want that to happen. So let's keep in mind, we like persuasion, we don't like coercion. And I'm sure you don't like to be coerced any more than I do.
I will say, one of the best visits we had from a food perspective was with John. He provided frozen Butterfingers, chocolate milk, and other snacks in his office. Appreciate it. Somebody who likes to eat whenever possible.
Very welcome.
Okay, anything else? Okay. Well, thank
Thank
you all
you.
very much.